What's going on, guys? It's Zach here, bringing you guys another fantasy football video. So I'm going to go over my top 15 tight ends and breaking them into a tier list so that you guys can see how I would break my rankings into a tier-based ranking system. Shortly after this video gets released, I'll be uploading my tier-based rankings to my website as well, so that you guys can use those. Those will be free for you guys to use all season, so highly recommend you do so. I find that tier-based ranking is most certainly the best way to go about uh, really ranking and evaluating players come draft time. There's obviously going to be quite a difference between Mark Andrews and Travis Kelce, and even though they're going to be ranked 1, 2 in the projections and in the rankings, I don't think that it would be fair to say that those two are in the same tier. And I think that you guys all generally understand that, but it's just a good idea to understand that you want to make sure that you're targeting players that are at the end of that, or make sure you're getting the best value you can. So make sure you're drafting guys that are being drafted towards the end of a tier. So maybe you view the tight end 4 just as valuable as the tight end 2, and then you probably want to be the guy that waits and drafts that tight end 4 by ADP rather than drafting the tight end 2 because there's not a huge drop off. So that's just an example there. This will be the last tier list video. I've already done the quarterback, running back, and wide receiver videos. So if you haven't watched those, I highly recommend you do so. It's been a lot of fun making these, and it'll be great to get my rankings up on the website as well for you guys. So with that, let's just get us started here. The obvious one, S tier, we've got Travis Kelce. There's not much that needs to be said here. Travis Kelce just ridiculously outscored every single other tight end last season in fantasy. It's highly likely he'll do that again this season. He's, again, the focal point of the Chiefs' offense, and he's got Patrick Mahomes at quarterback. The Chiefs really didn't add much at the wide receiver position this offseason to suggest that Travis Kelce is going to be losing out on any sort of target share. He is turning 34 here soon, so that is something to keep in mind just a little bit. But the way Travis Kelce plays, the way he didn't look like there was any sort of drop off at all last season, I'm by no means worried about it coming. I think that Travis Kelce is clear and far away the tight end one this season. I think the only way he doesn't really pay off at his ADP is if the other tight ends behind him perform a little bit better than they did last season. Last season, we saw a lot of the other top tier tight ends get hurt or just play poorly, and it meant that Travis Kelce was really the only one left that really put up monster numbers. So Travis Kelce's probably alone in S tier. He's clearly the best tight end available. That's why he's going in the first round, and I have no problem really drafting him there. Moving on to the tight end 2 in my rankings, and he'll be going in A tier. I've got Mark Andrews. Despite being tight end 2, it's fair to say that Mark Andrews is a tier below Travis Kelce, but he is coming off of a season just 2 years ago where he did actually finish as the tight end 1. Last season was a bit of a lost year for him and the Ravens, and that we saw Lamar Jackson get hurt. Mark Andrews got banged up throughout the season, and Mark Andrews still put up respectable numbers. He was still on pace for over 1,000 receiving yards and 8 touchdowns. There's really no reason to be worried about Mark Andrews. This is a team in the Ravens that say they're going to pass the ball quite a bit more this season. Mark Andrews is clearly an elite talent at the tight end position, so I like Mark Andrews a lot. I tend to find that he's the best value at the tight end position for me. He's a guy that I tend to really love drafting in that third round because I think he does have a chance to crack that tight end 1 position. Obviously, I'd still give it to Travis Kelce if I'm a betting man, but I think that Mark Andrews has a legitimate shot to finish as the tight end 1. He might be the only other tight end that has a reasonable shot at doing that. So because of that, that'll be the only player that goes in A tier here as well. So moving us on to my tight end 3, we've got Dallas Goedert. He's got a consensus ADP of tight end 6, so I'm significantly higher on him than the consensus, but however you want to slice it, Dallas Goedert is a really elite talent. He's a really great tight end. He's got Jalen Hurts throwing him the ball. It's a really consolidated target tree in Philadelphia between him, A.J. Brown, and Devonta Smith. I think that Dallas Goedert is certainly a top 5 talent at the tight end position in the NFL, and he's a part of a great offense. I'd be more than comfortable drafting him as my only tight end in drafts this season. He tends to be the guy that I find myself drafting the most if I missed out on Mark Andrews because I think he's got that upside to finish in the top 2 this season. I have him ranked as my tight end 3. I'd honestly be surprised if he finishes outside of the top 5, and he's just a really talented player on a good offense. I love drafting Dallas Goedert there. The next player that's also going to be falling in B tier here is going to be TJ Hawkinson. And we'll see if we can find him here. There he is. TJ Hawkinson was traded to the Minnesota Vikings about halfway through last season, and he was on pace to actually outpace Travis Kelce in targets if you exclude the game that he was effectively inactive for in Week 18, where the Vikings really had nothing to play for. This is an offense in the Minnesota that's going to throw the ball a ton. It's reasonable to assume they could easily throw the ball more than anyone else in the NFL this season. And if that's the case, you're going to see TJ Hawkinson get a massive amount of targets this year, especially in PPR formats. I think TJ Hawkinson's got a legitimate shot to finish as a top 3 tight end. If touchdowns break his way, he does have upside to crack into that top 2. I obviously think he's ranked just slightly below Dallas Goedert for me because I think Dallas Goedert is in a more of a consolidated target tree. There's really only 3 targets to spread the ball around for in Philadelphia, so where in Minnesota there's 4 between Osborne, Addison, Justin Jefferson and TJ Hawkinson. But however you want to slice it, TJ Hawkinson is a perfectly great value being drafted in the 5th round right now. I just tend to find myself waiting and taking Dallas Goedert a little bit later because I'm projecting him to be a little bit higher. But TJ Hawkinson is going to be great this season. I have no problem drafting him at all. Moving on to the next tier here, we're going down to my tight end 5, and that's David Njoku. David Njoku is ranked as my tight end 5 despite an ADP of tight end 9, and I have him ranked this way just because I think he's going to be the number 2 target in the Browns offense that should be better this season. I'm not a huge believer in Elijah Moore. He was given away by the Jets for effectively nothing. Even though he showed some talent, I just don't think I want to really bet on Elijah Moore taking a step forward here. And David Njoku is good. He's a really athletic player. He's certainly got the athletic profile to put up big numbers. He's got big play potential, and Deshaun Watson has a history of throwing the ball to his tight ends. If Deshaun Watson shows up and is anything better than what he was last season, David Njoku's got a legitimate shot to be a top 5 tight end, and that's where I have him ranked. So I like David Njoku quite a bit. I find myself drafting him somewhat often if I miss out on those top 3 or top 4 guys. Moving on to my tight end 6, I've got Evan Engram. We'll see if we can find him here, but Evan Ingram's another player I really like. He's going to be a integral part of a really good offense in Jacksonville. I have him ranked below guys in that top 4 tier just because I think that, again, it's going to be a really spread out target tree in Jacksonville. There's just a lot of guys that are going to demand targets between Ridley, Kirk, Zay Jones, Ingram, Etienne, and Bigsby. A lot of guys that are going to get targets in that offense. That offense would need to take a real significant step forward for Evan Engram to crack into that top 3. But Ingram's a really solid player. He's going to get a lot of targets. He's a pretty athletic specimen as well. He can certainly break a big play, and I have no problem if I have to go into the season with him as my tight end 1. The next tight end that's going to be in the same tier for me is going to be George Kittle. I think George Kittle is enough that needs to be said about him here. He's a really elite player. The only concern I have is that he's just not necessarily going to be super integral to the Niners offense. He's currently being drafted as the tight end 4, and I've got him ranked as my tight end 7, so I'm still projecting a good season for George Kittle, but he posted an 11 touchdown season last season. His previous career high was 6. I'd be shocked to see him repeat that number. I think that we're probably looking at like 6 or 7 touchdowns again this season, and he's just not really all that necessary to this Niners offense that's just loaded in skill position players. They've got Debo, Ayuk, Christian McCaffrey, and then George Kittle. And honestly, George Kittle is probably going to finish 4th out of that group in terms of targets this season. So you really will need the touchdowns to flow for him to be an elite tier tight end this season. I wouldn't really want to bet on that, so I find myself not really drafting George Kittle, although I think he's a perfectly acceptable tight end 1. Moving us on to the next tier of tight ends here, I've got Chig Okonkwo as my next tight end here. I actually think that... Oh, one second. No, Chig Okonkwo is a little bit lower. I haven't refreshed the order. So my next tight end is actually going to be Greg Dulcich. He'll be sliding right into D tier here. My apologies on the Chig Okonkwo thing. I updated my projection for him after Hopkins, but I forgot to reorder that list, so it was a little confusing there. But coming in at my tight end 9, tight end 8, I've got Greg Dulcich. I think Greg Dulcich is a really talented player. He's going to be a real important part of this Broncos offense this season. Sean Payton's really already raved about him, saying he expects big things from him, thinks he's going to play that joker position that we saw guys like Jimmy Graham and Alvin Kamara play for the Saints back in the day. So Greg Dulcich is a really athletic player. I think the Saints offense is going to take a step, or the Broncos offense is going to take a step forward, but the only concern really is just it's a bit of a projection there. We haven't seen it from him, so it's hard to put him up into that C tier of players, but I love the talent. I think he's going to have a really good year, and I have no problem drafting him, especially if you miss out on those top tier guys. After Greg Dulcich, I've got Darren Waller as my next tight end here. Darren Waller is another guy that I really just don't find myself drafting that much. I've currently got him ranked as my tight end 9, despite an ADP of tight end 7. I just don't see a world where he really comes back to the relevance that he had back in Las Vegas just a few years ago. He's an aging player that's been injured for the last couple of years. He's on an offense that only threw 17 passing touchdowns last season, so it's tough to really bet on regression for him in the touchdown department. He would just have to be not only very involved in this offense, but he'd have to be involved to the point where he's good enough that he elevates the entire offense as a whole. And I just don't know if he's that kind of player at this stage in his career. I think he's going to have a couple spike weeks because he is a good player, but it's going to be hard to know which ones those are going to come in. I think it's just going to be a really frustrating player to roster, so I don't find myself drafting him much at all. Up next, I've got Pat Freiermuth coming in as my tight end 10. I think that Pat Freiermuth is another really talented player. I think he's certainly got all the tools necessary to put together a really solid season. And he's just a guy that I still don't find myself drafting that much because I just don't see a world where the Steelers are a very potent offense. Pat Freiermuth is still going to be probably the third target in this offense, maybe the fourth behind Najee. And that makes it really difficult because I don't project the Steelers offense to be great, but I think he's going to be involved enough that he's going to catch enough passes that in a PPR format, Freiermuth will be stable. He's just not going to be a guy that's going to put together very many week-winning weeks for you. I don't find myself drafting much of him just because I don't really see an upside case there, but he slots right in here at the bottom of in D tier. He's a guy that you can start if you need to. I just don't really see any upside, so I don't really find myself drafting much of him. And then last but not least, the player in D tier for me coming in as my tight end 11 is going to be Kyle Pitts. Obviously, Kyle Pitts is an elite talent. I have no problem betting on Kyle Pitts, the talent to break out, but my concern is just that Desmond Ridder is very clearly not going to be an elite producer at the quarterback position. This is a team that wants to run the ball a ton, and we saw how much of a frustration it was to roster Kyle Pitts last season. I really don't know if that's going to change. Even if this Falcons offense does take a step forward, it's still going to be an offense that's going to be one of the run heaviest in the NFL. I would still expect Kyle Pitts to operate just behind Drake London in terms of target share, so you're just going to need him to be really efficient, and it's going to be tough for him to do that with such a bad quarterback. Maybe Desmond Ridder comes out and surprises me, but I haven't seen much. I don't really expect him to be a very quality performer. I think it's possible we see some Taylor Heineke by the end of the season as well in Atlanta, and it's just going to be a bumpy ride. Given that Kyle Pitts is being drafted as the tight end 5, I find myself just never drafting him because I just don't see it. I know he's really talented. I think he's still going to have a really great career, but I just don't think this is the year. He's going to need a new head coach and a new quarterback before that happens. So it looks like we're going to need to add a new tier here. I think that tier pretty much summed up our top 11 here. And then when we get into tier 12, we're sort of just looking at some dart throw players that I think have upside, but not guys that I'm really drafting very often. We'll start us off here with Tyler Higbee. Tyler Higbee, he's a talented player. He's going to be a very integral part of this Rams offense. I think he's going to be another guy, kind of like that Pat Freiermuth mold, where you can play him on a weekly basis and he's going to be okay. But I just don't really know what the upside is. I don't think he's a very elite talent, and I don't think this Rams offense is going to be anything special. If this Rams offense is better than we think it's going to be because Cooper Kupp and Cam Akers are the focal points. But Higbee's a guy that you could play in good matchups, but I don't really find myself drafting him. I just don't see any value in doing that. After Tyler Higbee, the next guy in my rankings is going to be Dalton Kincaid. Dalton Kincaid's a guy that I think really is an elite talent. I think he's going to have a really good career in the NFL, but it's just hard to really bet on a tight end to break out and have a really quality season as a rookie. It's just going to be tough for him to do that. I think the Bills' offense is the perfect one for him to do that in, but it's just going to be tough. I can't really bet on that, but I certainly understand the dart throw. I'm going to skip down to my rankings a little bit as well, just to talk about a couple other players that I draft as late round dart throws. So we're getting past the point of being in consensus with my rankings here, but Chig Okonkwo is a guy that I find myself liking quite a bit. I've got him currently ranked as my tight end 15, so a little further down in my ranks prior to the acquisition of DeAndre Hopkins, he was ranked as my tight end 8, so I was really in on him this season, but I had to bump his target share down quite a bit. I had to bump down his touchdown share as well, and it just makes it difficult for Chig to really break out this season, but I think he's a really talented player. It's possible that DeAndre Hopkins is just washed, or maybe DeAndre Hopkins get hurt, so I think the upside's there with the talent, and given the draft capital, I think it could drop a little bit as well this season. I think you could see him really perform well and be a nice sleeper, especially towards the second half of the season. Another guy I find myself drafting quite a bit late is Gerald Everett. I've talked a lot about how much I love this Chargers offense this season. I think Gerald Everett's a talented player. He's a really explosive athlete, and he can do a lot with the ball in his hands. So he's got a real good shot of putting up some spike weeks. And if you need him as just like a bye-week fill-in, or you just want to let it ride and hope he has this fluky touchdown season, I can certainly see that happening this year. And then the last tight end that I see myself drafting on occasion here is Irv Smith. I really like the talent in Irv Smith. He's just been a player that can't really stay healthy, but he is going to be on the field a lot for the Cincinnati Bengals. He's replacing Hayden Hurst, and although Hayden Hurst is a really good player, Irv Smith is a much more explosive athlete. If Irv Smith can stay healthy and put his foot down as maybe the number 3 option in this Bengals offense, the sky's kind of the limit there. So even though I don't really expect much from Irv Smith this season, I've got him projected to be my tight end 19. I think there is legitimate upside there, and if you want to take a flyer on him, he could really pan out this season. So yeah, so that'll do it. That'll be the only 15 players I'll touch on here. I think that, 16 players. I think that in general it's pretty clear. My recommendation, I don't find myself really taking Travis Kelce in the first round. I tend to not really like how my team has felt come together after I do that. I really like the value of getting Mark Andrews in the 3rd round, so he tends to be the guy that I target more than anything. Then I look for Dallas Goedert in like that 7th, 8th round range, and if I miss out on him, I find myself drafting Greg Dulcich or David Njoku. But I think that there's definitely values to be had. A lot of these guys, I could easily be wrong about guys like Kittle or Kyle Pitts, so totally understand the upside there. But just to summarize, in S tier, we've got the obvious Travis Kelce. In A tier, we've got Mark Andrews. In B tier, we've got Dallas Goedert and TJ Hawkinson. In C tier, we've got David Njoku, Evan Ingram, George Kittle. In D tier, we've got Greg Dulcich, Darren Waller, Pat Freiermuth, and Kyle Pitts. And then lastly, in E tier, we've got Tyler Higbee, Dalton Kincaid, Chig Okonkwo, Gerald Everett, and Irv Smith. So, yeah, that'll do it for my tight end rankings and tier list video. Like I said, I put out the tier list videos for the quarterback, running back, and wide receiver positions as well. So, if you want to take a look at those, feel free to go do that. If this was your first time on the channel, thank you so much for stopping by. I really appreciate it. If you want more content like this, please do subscribe to the channel. You can click the notification bell so you get notifications when more videos come out. And if you liked the video, which I hope you did because you made it all the way here, please do give it a thumbs up. It really helps the YouTube algorithm, helps me know that I'm doing a good job, and really helps grow the channel as well. So thank you so much for everything, and I'll catch you next time. Thank you guys for watching. If you haven't already, please be sure to subscribe to the channel, like the video, check out these other videos here if you haven't. If you want more content, please feel free to follow me on Twitter at RealSteelFFB. I'll be more active on there as the season goes on. Thanks. Catch you later.